one of my favorite times of our show is when we get to bring artists from the 80s on the show. And this episode, we have a great one. Keyboardist and piano player of Glass Tiger, Mr. Sam Reid, joins us today. And we play Glass Tiger all the time. We were actually slated to play them this week, even before we had the interview. So that says a lot. Mr. Sam Reid, thank you so much for joining us on the 80s at 8.
Great to be here, Harry. Thanks for having us.
I feel a connection. Even though we're not in Canada, we're 2 hours south. So every once in a while, I'll joke that here in North Dakota that I'm from South Canada.
Yeah, that works.
There you go. Have you with Glass Tiger? Have you ever played in North Dakota? Do you remember playing any shows?
I'm trying to go back through, and I should probably look at, because I'm a pack rat. I keep all my old touring books and stuff to remind myself of how many places we've been. And I know we probably went through there on the Journey tour in 1986 because we covered really almost all of America. And I know that there was very few places we didn't get to. So the problem with that tour is A, it was a long time ago, and B, we were so on the road quickly, like one night move, one night move. It didn't really get us a chance to feel like we got a chance to visit a lot of places that was on that tour, except for the arena. So I think we're probably due for another trip back sometime.
Absolutely. But I'm sure you've played Winnipeg, which is, about 2.5 hours away. I'm sure you've played Winnipeg plenty of times.
Winnipeg is definitely on our sort of common list of Calgary, Winnipeg, Edmonton, everywhere. All those towns across Canada certainly are a mainstay for us.
Very cool. Well, Glass Tiger is so cool, and you guys, of the five original members, four of you guys are still together, and you guys were you high school friends? I mean, it sounds like you guys go way back.
We definitely go back to high school, although we were in high school at different times. So I'm the youngest in the band. Alan's the eldest in the band, and we both went to the same high school, but in like there's 7 years between us. So we mostly connected from a small town that we were all in the same town together. So even though we have a high school connection, it was all happening at different times.
And so you were from the Toronto area, right? Kind of a suburb of Toronto.
Yeah, Newmarket is a small town about an hour north of Toronto, and it's now turned into a bigger town. But back in the day, it was very very smallish kind of feeling, and we cultivated the band there, and we became what we used to like to say. We became big fish in a small pond. Toronto being the big pond. And we established ourselves in Newmarket as a small town before going into the big city, as we would call it.
Very cool. And am I correct? Did it kind of start with two different bands that kind of came together to join what is now known as Glass Tiger?
Yeah, again, small town, so everybody knows everybody's business. The So in the music world, I had a band called The End, which the original drummer Michael Hansen played in, and we had some local success. Not recording albums or anything. And then Alan and Wayne, the bass player, and Al Connolly were in a band called Onyx, and both bands imploded basically. And then again, small town, everybody knows everybody's business, and we realized that the remnants from both bands was basically a new band, and that's where we formed. Originally called Tokyo, and we performed under that name right up until we got a record contract. And that's when we decided we wanted a different name. And that's when we essentially just moved from Tokyo to Glass Tiger.
And how did you come up with the name Glass Tiger?
Yeah, it's a difficult thing to get five guys to agree on anything, especially a name. And band names tend to be very silly, actually. Years ago, I remember a friend telling me he heard this band from Britain, thought they were amazing, and they were here on import only. And he said, "Oh, you got to check them out. They're called The Police." And I thought it was the strangest name in the world. And I thought, what's next? The Firemen? I mean, it's like, that's just a dumb name. And so when we got to picking our own name, we didn't like Tokyo, because Tokyo was a name we needed quickly to put on a ticket because we were doing a show. And we thought, now's the time to speak up before we release an album, before we like basically set up a career under a name. At the time, our guitar player Al Conley was reading a book, and I don't know if it's by Norman Mailer or whatever. The term in the book was paper tiger, and it was a term that, so we were thrashing around names, and he said, "What about paper tiger?" Which, yeah, it was kind of like, yeah, it's got a nice ring to it, but paper tiger means false strength, and we're like, nah, that's not very good. And then Alan in the band, the singer, who the prime lyricist, said, "Take the paper out, make it glass, and we're good to go." And we were like, yeah, let's do it. So that's how that happened.
I love it. Again, we're joined by Sam Reid of Glass Tiger. So glad he's on the show. Um, Sam, what from 1983 when you guys got together to 1986 when you put your debut album, what was kind of taking place in those years? I mean, obviously, was it kind of a grind? Were you guys playing shows all the time, coming up with new material? What were those couple of years like?
Well, we were essentially like every other band of the area. We came out of a basement, went into the club circuit. And it's funny that when the band hit in 1986, and the country woke up because we were able to get a song on the radio and become a hit. A lot of people thought we came out of the woodwork, like out of nowhere. Like we were. Some of them even said, "Is this a band that Capitol Records put together?" And of course, nothing was further from the truth because we had, as you say, between actually 1981 to 1980, we got signed in 85. So for those 4 years, we toughed it out in the bar circuit, which in our area was basically all of the province of Ontario, which is pretty big, into Quebec with the French speaking part of the country. And we really spent all those years sort of as a blended. You had to play cover songs, otherwise you didn't get hired. So we would play a mix of the Police and Rush, and we would do some North American bands, some British bands because our singer is Scottish. And then we were also writing some songs back in those days and learning that craft. And a couple of the songs made it through, like Thin Red Line, the song Thin Red Line, and a song
Mhm.
called You're What I Look For, and a song called Ecstasy. Those all made it to the first album. So we cut our teeth on the bar circuit, and we used to tell the audience one of the big mistakes that bands made, or I don't know if they still make it, when you have an audience that's on the dance floor, you stop the show and tell them you're going to play an original song. We never did that. Uh, because that was a definite buzz killer right there. Like if you just like, people would sit down. But if you keep them on the dance floor and just say, "Hey, we're going to play a song of a band from England called Thin Red Line," and then people afterwards would say, "Hey, we like that song. What's the band?" And I said, "Well, it's actually our song." So that's how we intertwined the original material into the cover material.
That's very cool. I One thing that I find interesting is from 1981 to 1985, synth pop became, I mean, really was built in those middle years there. How do you think that the emergence of that style of music changed Glass Tiger?
Well, certainly as the keyboard player, it changed my world greatly. I started in classical piano when I was 5, and I was doing all of the Royal Conservatory grades here, heading in the direction of probably a music teacher because my fingers are too short to be a concert pianist. But but anyways, my background's more classical, and then when I got involved in the band, I started getting into the synths, and I had memory moogs and ARP Omnis, and I still have most of my original gear. And I was very excited about electronic. I love piano. I love an acoustic piano, but I'm sitting in a room right now filled with synthesizers from that decade, and that was a big influence. And we were listening to bands like Depeche Mode and Spandau Ballet, and all those bands were definitely influence on my keyboard side of things. So the synth was something if you listen to our early demos, that you can hear the influence and the amount of synthesizers that are in there, quite a bit actually.
Yeah, it's such a fun style of music to really get into. Last year we had a member of Information Society, and it was so fun to just kind of hear his influences or a lot of the same influences that you had. And he just said the first time he heard some of those songs, it was just like how are they making these noises? And I'm sure when you heard Depeche Mode and some of those bands that it was there was probably a kind of a shock hearing that kind of music for the first time.
Yeah, and we would cover some of that music. So the challenge is you'd have to listen to, I'm going to date myself, you'd have to listen to the vinyl, the album, and you'd have the needle parked over it, and you'd have to try to pick out your parts. So, there's no music, there's no chart for doing this stuff. So I'd have to listen to the part in the Depeche Mode song and say, I think it's this sound, and then I'd have to go over to my Moog and see if I could recreate the sound as close as possible. And that was definitely kind of reverse engineering all of that stuff. But that's how you learn your instruments.
Again, we are with Sam Reid, keyboard player for Glass Tiger, and let's talk about it straight up. The first single, I mean, that's huge that your first single was such a giant hit. Don't Forget Me When I'm Gone, number 2 hit in the US, number 1 in Canada. How quickly did this song become a hit? Was it an overnight thing? Did it take a long time to rise up the charts? What was kind of the feeling once you released the song?
It was a shock for us because it did happen very quickly. And again, we discussed, the background of playing all those years in the bars. And then when it finally got to recording an original album, and we had the album in the can, and Capitol Records at the time felt that we needed one or two more songs. So they sent us to Vancouver to write with a gentleman. His name is Jim Valance, and you might not know his name, but you know his music. He co-wrote all of the big, huge Bryan Adams hits, and others. I mean, Scorpions and Heart, and all these bands. Jim co-wrote so many of those songs, and we got sent to Vancouver specifically to write a couple of singles, and rewrote "Don't Forget Me" and "Someday" in the same day. Like our
Wow.
first day meeting him, sitting down in his little home studio, we cranked out both of those songs in that afternoon, and flew home to Toronto, presented it to the record company, and they flipped. They were like, "You guys nailed it. This is..." Now we had no perspective because we've never released anything, so we had no idea if it was going to be, big or small or whatever. We felt good about it, and the record company were very confident that it was going to take off. And once it went to radio, and the radio programmers got to hear it, they were like, "This is cool. We're going to get all over this," and it just went off like wildfire at that point. And I remember the record company, Tim Tromley was the A&R guy, and he said, "I know you don't know what's coming, but hang on to your hat." And I think he realized that, with a hit single your life becomes touring, and it's exactly what happened. And now I know what he means by that.
Wow. Well, we'll play the song "Don't Forget Me" when I'm gone. Question: is this keyboards are a huge part of this song? Is this a fun song to play still to this day?
Yeah, actually, it is a fun song, and the horns became an afterthought. The original demo never had any horns in it, so it wasn't until I got home that I was playing around again with my synths with a horn patch, and then I called Jim and I said, "I think I have this idea. What about a horn section?" And then, of course, we used real horns in the actual. But the song was built on the bass line, which is a DX7 bass, for all those keyboard players out there. That funky bass line, it was how it started. I have a cassette tape recording from the actual day we wrote that, and you can hear it. Sometimes when I do songwriting workshops, I bring that work tape out because you can hear the sound in the room where the song's not a song yet, and you can hear the synth part, you can hear the bass keyboard part, which is driving the idea, and that's where that song, that's how it came to light. That's a foundation of that song.
Oh, that's really cool. Tell you what, let's play it. A monster hit, their first single from Glass Tiger. We're so glad to have Sam Reid join us on the 80s at 8. Here it is, "Don't Forget Me When I'm Gone." We'll be back here on the 80s at 8. We're back here on the 80s at 8. That was "Don't Forget Me When I'm Gone" by Glass Tiger, joined by the keyboard player of that song, of that band, Mr. Sam Reid. What is it like to still hear your hits on the radio? Do you still get a thrill after all these years, Sam?
Well, I gotta say, in all honesty, after 40 years or whatever that we've been doing this, it never gets old. I'm driving, we hear the song will pop up, in a grocery store, on the radio, wherever we're driving. And I have this little sort of a superstition that has always been there. And I think it relates back to the first time we heard the song on the radio. We were sitting with our families, we're all waiting to hear the song on the radio. We knew it was going to hit the radio at a certain day, at a certain hour. And in our house, we had 5 or 6 radios tuned to different radio stations because we weren't sure which one was going to start playing it. And then somebody would yell, my dad would yell, like, "It's in the kitchen, it's on in the kitchen." And we'd run into the kitchen to hear the song, right? And I think that registered with me, that how special it was to hear your music on the radio. It really felt like, we were now a professional entity. And to this day, if I'm driving and the song pops on the radio, which it does, thankfully, I have to wait and let it. I don't need to hear the song for my personal, but I feel like I got to stop and pay homage to this and listen to the whole thing and be grateful. So we are so very grateful that after this many years, we're still in gold rotation on so many radio stations in Canada and the US. We still get lots of fans in the US reaching out to us, and we wish we could come down and perform a little more, which is sort of in the works, but it's still great to hear it on the radio.
Well, absolutely. And one thing about Glass Tiger is, some bands in the 80s never got that second hit. I mean, they had the first hit and they just kept trying and trying, and no matter what, just never could quite get back on the radio. Well, Someday was a great follow-up. You guys had tons of success with it, hit the top 10 in the US, hit the top 10 in Canada, and, was very successful. What was kind of your feeling on Someday?
Well, there's an interesting story, a little stat that comes along with Someday, at least as it relates to Canada. So both of those songs were on the first album, The Thin Red Line, and they both became back-to-back singles and hit singles, number one singles here in Canada, top 10 in America, obviously, and that was great. But our version of the Grammys here is the Junos. So the Junos presented us with, at the end of that year, Don't Forget Me was such a big hit that we won Single of the Year at the Juno for that. Well, by the time Someday came out, it hit the next cutoff for the next year's Junos, and Someday won Single of the Year in Canada. So I believe at the time, it was the first time that back-to-back Single of the Year was awarded to songs that appeared on the same album. So that's how long we ended up 5 singles deep on that album, and Someday didn't disappoint. And of course, we were thrilled because the immediate thing is you're grateful that Don't Forget Me was such a big hit, but then you're thinking, oh my God, how do we follow that up? And like you said, a lot of bands don't follow it up. And we were delighted when, we had 5 singles off that first album, and it really sort of took away the one hit wonder thing that if you can't pull off another hit, then unfortunately you get put in that category. And we were delighted that Someday was such a massive hit as well.
So interesting that was written in the very same day as Don't Forget Me.
Back to back. And I have the live, like I said, the audio was quite interesting because when you hear Alan sort of reaching for a melody, he's singing la 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 lyrics, like there's no words, and then one word will pop out. I think he had the word Someday popped in quite early, but when you hear us writing it that day, we just had with the chemistry was terrific with Jim, and it just seemed like these songs just popped out. And at the end of that, we're like, wow, that's a pretty good day.
Something that's impressive to me, Sam, is, so many songs at that time, the follow-up kind of was almost a replica or a slightly different version of that first song. Someday and Don't Forget Me are very different songs.
Yeah, I agree, and which is again a nice thing because there's lots of bands that there's sound kind of mixes and sometimes there's a thread. There's always a thread, when you have the same singer, of course, but the songs came from 2 different perspectives. Don't Forget Me started with me jamming on the keyboard and then everyone dropping in on it. Someday was the opposite. It was actually Jim Valance that was playing the little marimba part and kind of jiving along with a little Lindrum beat. And when we walked in the room, we were like, that's cool. What's that? So probably the difference is the fact that a different person kind of started the ball rolling on the second song, and that helps take away from some of the songs that end up sounding the same. So they gave us a definitely a different sound for the second single.
Absolutely. Let's play it here on the 80s at 8. We have Sam Reid joining us, and the song is Someday by Glass Tiger. We'll be right back on the 80s at 8. Oh, what a great song. That was Someday, Glass Tiger. We're joined by keyboard player Mr. Sam Reid. Sam, it's time. I have to ask, what was it like to film a video on a mountain, and what mountain was it? The song I Will Be There. I love the video so much, and I need to know the story about recording on a mountain.
Well, it certainly was one of the more exciting after all the videos we did, and I think officially there was 14 or 20 of them across our career back when MTV and in Canada Much Music, we every time you released a single you had to go make a video, and for the song I Will Be There, because there's a line in the song calling from the mountains,
Yep.
and so the video director, who was based in British Columbia, said, well, we have the best mountains in the world here, so I think we should come out here to the Rocky Mountains. And that's where that idea started. And then we went out and filmed near Whistler. There's a mountain specifically in that video. That mountain that we're on is called Tabletop Mountain because it's flat like a table. But you can only get there with a helicopter. So the thrilling part of that video is we had 2 or 3 helicopters booked, and they would take us up and down to do that shooting. And we had to airlift a drum set and the keyboards underneath the helicopter to float it up to the top of this mountain. And they parked us in the snow up there. And it was just a thrilling video to make. It's the one thing that's beautiful in Canada is it's such a big country that you've got flat prairies and you've got the rugged East Coast, and if you head west, you got the Rocky Mountains. So they're like the Swiss Alps over there, and it's just the Rocky Mountains are spectacular. And it was such a great match, for the lyrics in the song. And there's a very very cool scene in the guitar solo in that video where you see Al Connolly, the director, suggested that he go to the edge of the mountain and kind of lean there for the guitar solo. Well, the problem is there's probably, I don't know, 10 or 20 feet of snow layered on the top. So you don't really know where the edge of the mountain finishes and what the snow overhangs. So I even think when I look at it, I think I can't believe Al did that shot. Like he's literally on the side of it. And I was in the helicopter when we went up the face of the mountain to get the photo. They took the door off the helicopter, and oh my God, we almost blew poor Al off the side of that mountain getting that shot. And you watch the video, you can see the wind, the prop wash, going around him as he does the shot. But that's a little trivia for that video. And the manager freaked when he saw that because it was a pretty dangerous. There was no stuntmen back then, so.
Wow, that's unreal. I gotta say, I love the song "I'll Be There." I'm actually really surprised it wasn't a bigger hit. It did hit the top 40 in the U.S. and Canada, but I thought it would be even a bigger hit. I do have to apologize. For years, I thought this was a Bryan Adams song because he is in the chorus, and he sang two of your singles. His voice was on there. What was kind of the relation with Bryan Adams in the band?
Well, of course, the close connection to Jim Vallance, who was not only, Jim started as our co-writer when we wrote Don't Forget Me and Someday and other songs. But Jim, we had such a great relationship with Jim that it was, we didn't have a producer for the album. And we invited him, like, this is great. Let's just keep going. Would you produce the album? Which we're so thankful he produced our first 2 albums. And so that turned into a pretty lengthy and kind of the relationship with Jim, and of course he's so close to working with Bryan. Bryan got to hear a lot of the music that we were producing with Jim, and he would often pop over to the house when we were working in Vancouver, and he would listen to things here and there. And he was in Toronto to do the Junos, which is our Grammys. and I don't know whose idea it was, whether it was Jim's, Brian's, or Alan's, but they said we should get both singers in the studio and just mess around. And so they popped into Eastern Sound in Toronto, and that's how we ended up with Brian's voice on "Don't Forget Me," and he sang a little line in "I Will Be There" as well. So it was just started as a fun thing, nothing more thought about it, and it ended up being, because Brian is such an established artist and we were a brand new band. A lot of the media and press picked up on the fact that Brian was singing with us, but it was because of his close relationship with Jim Valance that we got to work with Brian.
Very cool. And now we'll do a double play, and we'll do "I Will Be There" and "I'm Still Standing," which was or
I'm still
sorry,
searching.
"I'm Still Searching." Gosh dang it, I'm
Yes.
trying to. You're not Elton John, but I'll take this song over "I'm Still Standing." So
Yeah, well, and we are still standing, so it's appropriate either way.
there you go. Well, I love "I'm Still Searching." The lead single off of Diamond Sun. Anything specific on this song, Sam?
Well, this was our follow up to the massive Thin Red Line for us, and again, you go from getting rid of the one hit wonder thing, which we did with 5 singles off the first album, but then you think we still need to follow up that very successful album with another successful album. So the Diamond Sun record, of course, had a bit of and the thing, we had been on the road for 17 months. So when you work on your first album, you have years to put it together. When you work on your second album, coming off of a successful record, you've been on the road, so you have 6 months to put it together. So the challenge was writing the music while we were touring. We wrote with Jim Valance again, of course, and produced with Jim Valance. And when we got together to do the Diamond Sun record, we felt really good about it. And of course, we were thrilled that the title track, Diamond Sun, "I'm Still Searching," a couple of lead singles come off that record right away, and became hits here in Canada. And so "I'm Still Searching," we gave it a little more of a guitar approach, and a little less keyboard. That's just the song went down, and it started from an acoustic guitar riff. So that's where that song comes in. I mean, it's still a favorite in the show today. We still get a lot of fan response to that track.
Well, for sure. Number 2 hit in Canada, hit the top 40 in the US. So let's hear 2 songs from the top 40 in the US Billboard chart. It's "I Will Be There," "I'm Still Searching," not "I'm Still Standing." Here on the 80s at 8 by Glass Tiger, joined by Sam Reid, and we'll be right back. Sam, we've heard 4 of the top 40 songs in the Billboard chart. Are there any other songs from the 80s? Is there one specific song that has kind of a soft spot in your heart that you'd like to play here on the show?
Well, I'm torn. Like, if you ask that same question to any of the band members, you get a slightly different answer. But I think the one that would definitely, if I was going retro, I'd say "Thin Red Line." I think a lot of people, when that was originally going to be our first single, by the way, it wasn't going to be "Don't Forget Me." We released it for a very, very short time in the US, and radio jumped on "Don't Forget Me." So we switched gears very quickly. But "Thin Red Line" it was one of our older songs that survived the early writing years and got developed on the first album. A lot of people thought it had a bit of a U2 vibe to it, which of course we're big fans of U2, so that was wonderful. So "Thin Red Line" as a retro track, and if I had to go for something on the Diamond Sun record or a bit newer, "Worlds Crumble," because I always felt it had a bit of a Queen. I'm a huge Queen fan, and the falsetto voice with the piano, and of course we still perform that live. I love working on that. Little side story: if you want to play "Worlds Crumble," the little side story is we were writing that when we were touring with Journey, and at soundcheck, Steve Perry used to sit behind the drum kit and hash this song out with me. So "Worlds Crumble" is a very special song. It took a while for it to develop, but I'm pretty proud of the end result.
Awesome. We're excited to play it here. The song, watching in parentheses, "Worlds Crumble." It's from 1989, hit 27 on the Canadian chart. So excited to play it here, Sam.
Awesome. Thanks, Harry.
So here it is on the 80s at 8. And then when we come back, we'll wrap everything up, and we'll have a special surprise for our listeners. So here it is on the 80s at 8. It's "Watching Worlds Crumble." That was Worlds Crumble here on the 80s at 8 by Glass Tiger. We're joined by Sam Reid. Sam, we're gonna take a little fast forward, and I like to make my co-host squirm a little bit because we're an 80s show. We don't play much out of the 80s, but I love the song "This Is Your Life" off of the EP 33, and I would love to play it for our listeners. Could you talk a little bit about what it was like to go back into the studio in 2019 and what it's like still to perform with the band today?
Well, and certainly an interesting that you would pick that song. It's one of the newer tracks that resonates with fans, and there is a backstory to it. We were planning to put a record together for our 30th anniversary, and we were in discussions to do that. We were writing songs in the background and getting ready for it. And right when we were about to get ready for that, 2015, our singer Alan Frew had a medical set. He had a stroke, and of course, everything then comes to a grinding halt. And thankfully, he recovered, and it took quite a while. But we realized we were going to miss, and it's not important. 30 is just a number, and it's only a special number for us because it was 30 years at that point. But we realized, that we weren't going to make the 30 deadline. So by the time we put the record together, it was 31. And we thought it would be kind of cheeky and clever. Everybody releases a 30th thing, but who does 31? So we decided to run with that. And that album, 31, was an EP. And This Is Your Life was a song that we worked up for that record. And it's a very mature track, but also the band is, 31 years in. We're not in our 20s anymore. And the song lyrically had a special place in Alan's heart after recovering from a stroke. And, it's the typical thing that happens when you get a little older and you start realizing how quickly life goes by, and how things change on a dime. And that song reflects a lot of that emotion and feeling that was going on at the time. And that's we ended up touring in Canada with that. And when the fans got to hear that track, I think they can feel the honesty in that song and the reason why it's a special track for us. Yeah, I'm delighted that you picked that song out of the newer stuff, even though it's not an 80s track. It's still very close to our heart and something we're very, very proud of.
And when you do a song like that in the lyrics, have you gotten a lot of response from listeners that the lyrics did touch them and they could relate to the lyrics?
Oh, absolutely. As a matter of fact, Alan went a step further and he documented his recovery, which ended up becoming a source of inspiration for a lot of people because, heart disease, strokes. I mean, nobody gets through life without having, somebody close or in your family that's dealing with, a multitude of things. But certainly a lot of people would reach out specifically to Alan and found some strength in those lyrics to deal with their own recovery from stroke. And they would often share their stories. They would send us messages. And so you realize that, one of the things, well, probably the best compliment you can give to a songwriter, and it used to happen even as far back as when Someday was released. We used to get fan responses, and you'd get a letter from a fan that would say, I just listened to your song Someday. How did you know how I was feeling? And of course, that's the best compliment in the world as a songwriter, because what we think of the song and what we think the lyrics mean doesn't really matter. It's whatever your listener takes out of it. And if they have a different reason why they attach themselves to that song, it's just as valid. And that's when you've hit a mark as a songwriter, because people will, something will resonate in that song. And This Is Your Life is certainly one of those tracks that resonated. So we're very pleased that we were able to release that.
You bet. And Sam, you're still have a show list, still playing a lot. Are you guys recording new music, or what's going on right now with Glass Tiger?
We have, we probably have another album sitting in what I call our spare parts file. We never stop writing songs, even though, a lot of them we do a lot of stuff for fans now, and anything new that we release will certainly be on our social media web channels and stuff like that. So you'll always be able to find it. We are working on new material. We're still touring. We're still an active band. If you look at glasstiger.ca, you'll see our show list. We've been really trying to figure out how we can get back into the US. We get so many lovely fan messages from all over the US, actually, that maybe saw us back in the mid 80s. We did a round of shows at Disney in Anaheim and in Florida. There was a bunch of what do they call high school graduations. And it's amazing how many people go, "Oh my God, I saw you. We were 3 weeks at Disney." And they said, "When are you coming back?" So we did come down and do some Epcot shows. We were able to do some US shows, but then COVID hit. So those got blown out. But we are working on a really special show in a destination in the US where we would like to maybe reach out to our US fans and say, if we can't get to individual cities, if we parked our butt in a really cool place for a few shows, would you come and see us there? So there's an announcement coming for that.
That's amazing. That's awesome. And just my last question, what has it been like to do this all these years with this group of guys? I mean, that from the same town, you guys have known each other all this time. What's it been like to do with this specific group?
Well, certainly we've now, we're as close to our road family as we are to our home families. And, Glass Tiger and the four guys that are still here, are brothers. We're brothers. I mean, at this point, we've celebrated so many, positive moments and emotional moments. I mean, we've spent 40 years on the road together. So you can imagine, how many birthdays, anniversaries, funerals, you name it, we've spent it together. And sometimes we've had to hold each other up because, it might be something where you just physically can't get home. So your road family, after you spend that much time together, it becomes pretty tight. And we realize how special it is after 40 years to still be in a tour bus with looking across at the same bunch of guys that we left the basement with 40 years earlier. So that it's pretty cool. We know how special that is. A lot of bands don't get to do that. And we're so thrilled that we're still pals and still doing this.
Absolutely. Well, Sam, thank you so much for joining us today. It was an honor to have you on the show. And Glass Tigers, like I said, we played you guys tons, and it's just such an honor to have you on the show.
Well, thanks for having us, and thanks for spinning the Glass Tiger tunes, and hopefully we get a chance to see some fans and get to see some of our US fan base sometime in 2024, 25. And thanks for having us on, Harry.
And I don't think there's a more appropriate way to send you off than with the song "This Is Your Life." Glass Tiger, great song, and just a great band. Have a great one. Thanks so much again, Sam.
All the best. Thanks, Harry.